Recognize that. Joe Nichols, how's my volume? Should I be here or right there? Right here, okay? Okay. Anyway, I would first like, we have some of our board members that are here. If you would wave, I want to thank them. We've got Stephanie Johnson, Scott Hovis, Ken Inlow, and Lorelei Swartz, and Lori Massman. And I think Steve Bruce said he was maybe coming, and I'm not sure about Lindsay, but thank you guys for being here. So tonight we are discussing and looking at our K through 8 spacing needs. This isn't something that just came about. We're actually going to show a clip from the night of April 4th, 2017, when we passed J+C, and we addressed that we would be looking at down the road at a later date, and we are now down the road at a later date here in 2020. So we have needs. Our goal, we want to ensure that our students experience student success by giving them hope for a better tomorrow. And we want to become a premier school district. We're not saying that facilities is the silver bullet to make that happen. What makes that happen is being stronger together, not only with our teachers and our students, but our families and our community being stronger together. So that's one of the reasons for having this tonight, as we value input and as we work through the process to look at considerations to address our space needs. So we will address this. We're about students. We've got some of our middle school, some of our elementary, some of our preschool students here. At the end of the day, that's the business that we're in. Student success and our students, that's what we do for a living, and it's an opportunity that we have to make a difference in our community through our students. So how did we get here? So this is my 5th year. I started July 1 of 2015, and there was a long-range facilities committee in 2000. When I got here, the first meeting that I went, the committee had convened and had met, and they addressed that there was overcrowding in grades K through 12. Okay, at the time there was a recommendation to consider another high school, another elementary school, but it didn't address the middle school overcrowding at that time. Through the Long Range Facilities Committee and our Board of Education, they determined of prioritizing the needs of 9 through 12 through moving forward, which ultimately led to Capital City High School and renovating Jeff City High School and Nichols Career Center to address the 9 through 12. We still had the K through 8 overcrowding and space needs that needed to be addressed. So through the Long Range Facilities Committee, prioritizing with the 9 through 12 with the J+C. Thank you as a support of our community. Our community supported that. This fall, opened Capital City High School. With that being said, I would like to invite you this Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. at Jeff City High School. We will have an open house. We'd like to invite you. 2 p.m. the Chiefs game is on. We will have a TV with the Chiefs game on, so it will be there. 3 p.m. Capital City High School will have an open house from 3 to 5. So this Sunday is an open house at both Jefferson City and Capital City. So we would like to invite you. So we touched on the K through 8 space needs will be addressed at a later date. Here in the fall of 2020, this coming fall, we are anticipating 7 of the 13 elementary and middle schools, 53% will have trailers on site due to overcrowding. You can educate kids in trailers. You can do that. We are doing that. We will continue to do that as needed, but it's not part of our, as we believe to be a premier school district, as far as having trailers at our schools. But you do what you need to do, and if you need to have trailers, you do that. But it's not part of our long-term plans to do that. So this is going to be a clip of, I touched on here earlier, the evening of, after we passed J+C, I believe Channel 17 interviewed and asked me the question, what are you doing about your elementary and middle school needs? So this was from April 4 of 2017. I was a few pounds lighter, and I was told today that I looked younger 2 years ago. So anyway, if you play that, please.
More detail with more specifics, and we'll make sure to communicate with folks through that process.
Okay, and you guys have said before that this will also address the space needs at the middle and elementary schools. How are you going to address those needs?
That'll be down the road. This here is just about the second high school, renovating the current high school, Nichols Children's Care Center as well. But with the principal that we paid off on the current debt that we have, we believe in 4 to 5 years that we will be able to look at addressing our elementary and middle school needs that we have. That is no tax increase bond issues. And so that's just an important part of a long-range plan to address the needs across the district, not only at the high school, but at the elementary and middle school level as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And that's all we have right now. Reporting live.
So we addressed when we said in 4 to 5 years, that was 3 years ago. And as we look at it, would be 5 to 6 years if we did take this to the voters and they did approve the consideration that we're looking at. So it wasn't just something that, hey, now what are we going to do? Let's go do something else. It has been a plan as we look at this is 3 years ago of how are we going to address the needs. We just want to bring that clip to show that we had said that and we're doing what we said we were going to do. The J+C with Capital City High School and Jeff City High School is on time and under budget. And we've been very excited and pleased about that. And again, if you can come Sunday, we'd love to see you at JCSchools. So we are now, did I go through that?
You did.
I did, okay. So our current high school projects on time and under budget. We have here on the left is Capital City High School, that's at the gymnasium. On the right is at Jefferson City High School. Again, that's just a couple pictures from there. One big thing that we are super excited throughout the J+C campaign, we had shared we're in the kid business, experiencing student success. We want to give more kids an opportunity to experience student success. Fall participation in extracurricular activities. This last fall of 18, compared to the previous year of students 9 through 12, participation rate was up 44%. Of the winter activities, it's up 49%. So that's, at the end of the day, that gives me goosebumps as I say it, because that's why we want to give students an opportunity. We've had parents that have said, hey, my student wasn't going to go out for band because they didn't think they had a chance, or an athletic club, or a club, or an athletic team, or so forth. So we are super excited about that, and that's of our current projects. So our goal is to address the K-8 overcrowding without raising the tax rate. Jason Hoffman, our CFO, COO, will get into details about how we are able to do that, but we are not looking to raise your taxes. That's something stewardship is one of our 3 pillars of being a good stewards of patrons' money, and we know it was an ask of our community to raise taxes to pay for Capital City High School and renovating Jefferson City High School. Jason will get into details how we can do that, but we are not coming forward to ask you to raise your taxes at all. So here's the current reality of our schools. So our poverty rate is 59.3%. The new rate we anticipate here in January will be 60%, but that's the official number when you look at the DESE website of our poverty rate. My first year teaching was at Jeff City High School in 95-96. Our poverty rate that year was 22.1%. So the demographics are changing in our community, and there are additional needs that go along with that. The pre-K needs increase as your poverty rates increase. And if you can just imagine, students that grow up in poverty, they do not have some basic skills that if they didn't grow up in poverty, whether parents reading with them, just spending time, your research would say, if students grow up in poverty, they have less skills when they start. So the need for our preschool, that is a need for, we have a waiting list for our preschools at Southwest Early Childhood Center. Callaway Hills also has preschool. There's a need there that if we could possibly address going forward to have neighborhood preschools as a part of our elementary schools is a very positive as we look at these considerations. There are more services required by law than many years ago. When we look at the OT, the PT, the special needs, the ELL, English language learners, there are just greater needs that we're required to address that years ago we didn't. And that requires space that at times maybe our buildings were not created for when they were built. We have an increasing mental health needs. Okay, when we talk to our staff, that's one of the, as I look around and see some of our teachers and heads nodding, those are real. We have increasing mental health needs, and that's an opportunity that we have to be a part of the solution to work with our parents, work with our families to try to address that. The increased English language learner I touched on. Our enrollment, I shared 3 years ago through the J+C, we're not growing like crazy. This year, I believe we were up 59 students compared to a year ago. We just have a slight incline. We are anticipating that to continue with renovating Jefferson City High School and Capital City High School. We're anticipating our enrollment to continue to grow, but at a slight rate. We're not in here to say that we're growing like crazy and here's why we need to do it, but we do have space needs and we do anticipate the enrollment to continue to incline. Trailers being used, 54%, I touched on that earlier, and 9 of our 13 K-8 schools are at or above capacity. So Jason's got some details on that he'll share with you later, but that's just kind of the current reality. So how do we compare to other districts? Okay, so we just took some schools here in our area. When we look at our tax rate and our poverty rate, as you can see, I won't go through every single one of those. That's official data from DESE's website. But your research would indicate the higher poverty rates you have, the greater needs that you have. If you think of a class of 20 kids in a classroom, and if you're at 60% poverty rate, and you've got 12 of those students that grew up in poverty, it's much different than if you are at 13%, let's say, our neighbors of the Falcons, to where 2 of those kids of 20 grew up in poverty. So there's just a greater need for students that grow up in poverty, and all the research would reflect that, and there's just an increased need with that. You can see how we compare to Columbia, Southern Boone, Fulton, poverty rates, and tax rates. So just a comparison there. And we'll make this available on our district website. I know we're live streaming here tonight, but we'll have this data available. Am I touching on this?
You can talk to the task and then you can.
Okay, so the facilities focus group. So looking at in the spring of 2019, so approximately a year ago, let's look at considerations to address, without raising the tax rate, how we could address our K-8 space needs, and looking at a pre-K as an option as well. So wanted to review our current space needs, explore expanding the pre-K that I touched on earlier, look at the pros and cons of those solutions, and then a preference for a limited or a no tax rate impact. We had discussions with our board, and it wasn't something of looking to raise taxes. We want to be good stewards. We had asked folks to raise their taxes, and we did. So trying to, if at all possible, to not raise our taxes. Okay, Brenda Hatfield's our Director of Quality Improvement, and she will touch on information gathering of this focus group.
So many months ago, Jason Hoffman and I got the wonderful task to get together with a group of concerned citizens. We got together with citizens from our community. We got together with teachers, some retired teachers, all together input to figure out what the best solution would be for this K-8 spacing needs. So we got that group together. We had a lot of meetings about what information do we need to gather, what information do we already have, and how can we use that information. So we toured every single building, all the pre-K, all the way through 12th grade, even toured Capital City to give them a sense of the current space throughout the entire district. We surveyed staff because we knew as a group that we wanted to understand what our teachers, our boots on the ground, what do they think is really happening in a building? Because that's the space that we need to address, not just the space that administrators think is needing to be addressed, but what our teachers are actually telling us as well as our support staff. So we did that. We reviewed and updated the space study by ACI Boland, and I'll let Jason touch on that in a minute. We also surveyed kindergarten, 6th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade families regarding their transition experience when they went from grade to grade. We knew that that's always an issue. And I am a proud mom of a senior this year at Jeff City High School, and I have another graduate from Jeff City High School, and as a mother, it was really stressful that first time the first kid went to their 6th grade year, and we knew that was an issue for parents. And so what we wanted to understand is, from a parent's perspective, what were the things that we're doing really well with transition, and where are some things that we can improve on? So we'll obviously be working on those improvements this year, but we also wanted to say, if we were to ever add a transition, how would that affect those students, and how could we become better at that? So we gathered information from our parents. We also conducted focus groups with our 6th grade students, and that was fun, I have to tell you. So I sat down with some 6th graders and asked them how it went. What we do well, what we don't do well, what they would like to know from us, and how we as a district could better serve them as they transitioned. And so we'll have some details about that in a minute as well. We also met with 5th and 6th grade teachers because as we got further along in this process and we realized that we might want to look at a 5-6 option, we wanted to bring those teachers in and ask them what their concerns were, what they thought the pros were, and what they thought the cons were, and so we'll share that data with you as well. And then we also reviewed information we gathered regarding Missouri 5-6 buildings. As you may have heard, there are 22 5-6 buildings in the state of Missouri, and many of them gave us some wonderful information and some great tips on how to do something successfully. So the tour findings. So when we took our folks around, and we didn't do a bus, but we threatened to take them on a yellow bus, but we did not do a yellow bus, but we took them all around the district, and here's the things that we learned as a group as we were touring. Support services are being provided in non-classroom settings. So that could be anything from behavioral supports, to speech, to reading, to occupational therapy, physical therapy, English language learners, any of those services. And they're being provided in what I think the committee would tell, or the focus group would tell you was unique situations. I mean, we have converted bottoms of stairwells or at the end of a hallway that's not busy. Our staff have done an amazing job at trying to fit things into a variety of spaces, and they've done amazing work. Unfortunately, what was very apparent to the group is there are no more creative spaces. They have done a great job, but we really don't have any other spaces to give them, and we'll have some pictures of that in a minute. We also learned that there are traffic and parking issues, and for anybody who drops off at Lawson or TJ, do I have any of my friends from there? Yeah. You know there's some traffic and there's some things. There's even some congestion here at West in the mornings. You know, I'm always thinking to myself, ooh, this is not fun. And I too drop off children, so I totally understand that pain for parents. Most buildings believe, and they told our focus group members this, that trailers could temporarily relieve their space pressures. And I think, had I been able to wrestle a trailer away from Jason, I would have been a queen at any of those schools that particular day. Because they do all believe that their space issues are pretty profound and they would like to get those fixed. We currently have trailers at East, Pioneer Trail, Callaway Hills, and TJ, but the schools that are most need of trailers are Lawson, North, and Mora Heights, and we do intend to add those trailers this fall to help those staff be able to deliver better services. So here's some examples of those unique spaces that I was talking about. You can see there's a little cubby down there under a stairwell, and that's a lovely space, and they've done a good job of making that a presentable, lovely learning space, but it's not ideal. And it's also limited in the number of students that we can serve in that. This is a hallway. The next one is a hallway. The picture's kind of scattered. And then over here, we've taken a space that's basically at the end of a hall by a door in order to add some more space. These are not unattractive spaces, but they are not an ideal learning environment for our students. Here's some examples of trailers at buildings. This trailer is Pioneer Trail, and then this is the inside of the trailer at Callaway Hills. The students actually were doing orchestra the day that we stopped by to take that photo. So we're very proud of our orchestra program for our 5th grade students, and we're thrilled that we at least have some space for them to do it, but I'm not sure that our orchestra instructors would call this ideal space. Mr. Hoffman. Jason Hoffman is our CFO and COO. I'm going to hand it over to him.
So ACI Bolin is an architect firm that we've worked with for a long time. They were a part of the project for J+C, and they helped with our last long-range facility committee that we had. And we had them come back in again and look at the capacities of our buildings. So to understand how a capacity study is done, there's no way that an architecture firm from Kansas City can come in and see how we're using spaces under stairwells and end of hallways. All they do is they say, here's how many 3rd graders we have, here's how many how many classes we need for those 3rd grade students based on a number per classroom. And so here's how many classrooms you would need. So it's only students divided by a number per classroom, and then how many classrooms do you have. So even with that, not accounting any of the extra ancillary services that we're providing, you can see the list of all the buildings that are already over capacity on that. And then, like this building is showing as below capacity, but there's not a single empty classroom in this building. And so what that means is we have 17 students per grade in 3rd grade. So if we get more 3rd graders, we have capacity for that. But we're at I think, 23 in 4th grade here. So if we got a bunch of 4th grade students and we needed to add another classroom, we don't have capacity there. So it's not a real true picture that we have extra capacity at these. But, and like we said, we have a trailer at Callaway Hills. It shows as under capacity. We have small class sizes there. Same thing at East, West, and South. So the focus group looked at several different options for us to solve these space needs. One of them was adding a 12th elementary. As we looked into that, we realized that that's really not an option because that doesn't really give us any space really. So we looked at even adding a 13th elementary school. Another option is adding a 3rd middle school. It was a recommendation that we look at 2 K1 buildings, which would then make the elementaries 2 through 6, and then the middle school 7, 8, and then the 5, 6 recommendation that would have the elementaries be K4, have 2 5, 6 buildings that we're going to talk about in more detail, and then the middle schools would be 7, 8.
Jason, would you touch on, maybe we'll hear just the, adding an elementary school, for example, addresses at the elementary school, you have a 12th elementary school, you have to redo boundary lines for the entire district, and your operations to fully staff an additional elementary school, you would have to raise the tax rate for that. So Jason may get into that.
I'm working on it. This is really slow.
So we went through each of these things to see what would the pros be of each of these and the cons. And so we were looking to reduce the enrollment in all of our K-5 buildings. And by adding 1 or even 2 elementary schools, that would reduce enrollment at most of our elementary schools. But we have 2 elementary schools north of the river. And so if you add elementary schools on both of those on this side of the river, it wouldn't add space in all K-5 buildings. Reduce at 3rd middle school would reduce space in both middle schools, but doesn't do anything for the elementaries. We're looking to not just free up a little bit of space, but free up several classrooms, which is only accomplished by the last 2. An opportunity to expand pre-K, as Dr. Linthicum said, is only done with the last 2 options. Busing. So adding a separate section, we think this is a pro that you have smaller groups of students on the bus together. So in the 5, 6 option, for example, you would have K4 students on a bus together. 5, 6 students would be on a bus by themselves. 6th graders wouldn't be on buses with 8th graders anymore. We'd have 7, 8 buses and then 9, 12 buses. And we want a solution that isn't something where we're coming back and say we have space needs again in a few years. We want something that's going to be a big solution, smaller populations at all our K-8 buildings, and doesn't raise tax rates. And you can see that really only the 2 options on the far right address all of those pros. And so then on the cons, sure.
I'm going to fight everybody's just saying this stuff. So here's the fun part. When we talked about this K1 building, this sounded really exciting. And when the group brought this forward, we were like, oh man, this could be really fun. But then we discovered something really important. We would actually be taking our youngest students and we would give them longer bus rides. We would also take them from neighborhood schools. And we thought that our families, at least I felt like for my family, and I think many of my fellow focus group members felt like it would be trauma to send your little one to be the first one off into a big school. And so we decided that was a big con of that K1 building. Students at a younger age would miss that neighborhood school and that neighborhood feel and be able to walk to school. If we added an elementary school, or even 2 elementary schools, one of the other challenges we would have is that we would need to restructure the boundary lines for all elementary schools in order to make sure that we adequately dispersed all of the children. And that was not a popular thing when we did that for Capital City. And I'm not available, Larry, whatever day you're doing that. Boundary lines, we change at both middle schools. If we added a middle school, we would have to do that in order to disperse children appropriately. Again, I am busy whatever day you're doing that, Larry. The other problem with the 3 middle schools is, how do we take 3 middle schools and feed them into 2 high schools? And that would be a big challenge, and that would be another boundary challenge, and that would be another thing that I think some of our families would not be terribly excited about as well. One of the things, though, about either the K-1 or the 5-6 building option is that it does add a transition at an earlier age. And as I told you, as a mom, for one, I'm always concerned about any transition that my kiddos have to go through. But in reality, we are transitioning kids every single year to another grade. So if we could become better at that, could we become better at that enough that it would work for all of our students? Potential longer bus ride for 5th graders if we had the 5-6 option, just as it would be for the K-1 folks if we had the K-1 option. And here's another one that as a mom, concerned me, adding additional pickup and drop off for parents. Right now, if you have a K through 5, you're making 1 drop, and if you have a 6, 7, 8, you're making another drop. If we instead took that group of children and put them in 3 separate buildings, some parents could potentially have 3 drop-offs, and we know that would be a challenge for our parents as well. We would have to increase the tax rate in order to do the adding elementary or adding the middle school. Fortunately, for the other 2 options, we did not have to do that. So in summary, you like the red and green? I think we're still feeling a little holiday spirit at JC. If we added the 12th or the 13th elementary school, we would solve elementary space issues. We would free up some space, and we would be able to make some space available in all buildings. Not as much as we'd like, but some. We would not affect the middle school space at all, just wouldn't. We could potentially expand pre-K if we added 12 or 13 elementary, but we would have to increase your taxes to do so. The 3rd middle school, we would not address, obviously we added a 3rd middle school, it would not address any of the K-5 space needs. It would address middle school needs, and it would help us out a lot on that. It would not help us expand pre-K, but it would increase your tax rate. The 2 K-1 buildings that on the property we have near the current middle schools, it does free up elementary space. It would free up middle school space. It would help us expand pre-K, and there would be no change to our tax rate. Our 2 5-6 buildings, the exact same thing. It will allow us to have extra elementary space, extra middle school space, expand pre-K, and there will be no change to our tax rate. So those 2 options are exactly the same. The big difference is which children you're choosing to move.
Okay, so the top 5 benefits, as we look at this, as we look at the 5-6 option of eliminating the trailers being used, okay? Brenda touched on earlier of having a long-term solution that we're not coming back to address an elementary issue or a middle school issue for a long-term solution that's sustainable of eliminating our trailers being used. A softer transition for students into middle school, okay? That is something that we currently know that we can improve as Brenda has surveyed our parents, talked with our 6th grade students, whether we pass a bond issue or whether we even bring it to the voters or not. We know this is an area that we can improve of that transition from 5th grade to 6th grade to improve that. Expand alternative learning environments for students who struggle to be successful in the traditional classrooms. Okay? We want our students to be successful. We want to believe in them. We want to embrace them and give them every opportunity to be successful. But having an alternative setting, a transition room, let's say, for example, that's been successful at Laurel Heights Elementary, looking at that model to give our students more of an opportunity to be successful. Provide the appropriate spaces for support services that Brenda touched on, and then the potential addition of preschool classrooms. So those are kind of a summary of, as we, up until this point, of the 5 things summarized of the top 5 that we see as opportunities with this. Okay, is Dr. Schindorf going to touch on this? Dr. Schindorf is our Chief of Learning and is going to touch on our 5-6 buildings.
Okay, so we reached out to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that oversee all of the schools across the state, and we asked them to identify districts that have 5-6 buildings so that we could reach out and talk with them. We found that there are 22 5-6 buildings across the state of Missouri. I reached out to all 22 of them, asked for an opportunity to interview and discuss the use of their space with them. We were able to speak with 16 of those 22 buildings to date, and we had a series of questions. We asked them all the same questions because we wanted to find out, how do you use the space? Why do you have a 5-6 program? How long have you had them? How large is your school? What does your playground look like? So we just want to get a sense as to what their space looked like and how they used them. And then ultimately we got to, if you had the opportunity to change your structure, would you change? Would you go to a different format? Here's some of the things that we found. The majority of the buildings have been in place for more than 10 years. I believe we found only a couple that were relatively new. The number of students in those schools vary from 300 to 900. The overarching advantages that they told us was that they believe it allowed for a softer transition program. And so what they said is they believe that what we currently have right now is a pretty hard transition from an elementary school, if you understand the way they function, into the middle school setting. It's a very drastic difference between those two. Well, right now, if you're an elementary student, if you're 5th grade going into 6th grade, you go from being with one teacher, being in one classroom with the same kids pretty much all day long into a middle school setting, and you're kind of on your own to run through the building, through the classes that you have throughout the day. So it's very drastically different, and it's a hard transition. What these schools said is that they use their 5-6 building in order to have a soft transition. So they bring their 5th graders in, and they, instead of being just like an elementary, they will modify it a little bit, so they do some departmentalizing, so the kiddos would not be with just one teacher, but they might have a homeroom teacher and go out to a couple other teachers for departmentalizing. And then they transition into 6th grade, where they might do a team approach, where they're part of a larger team and they see multiple teachers, and they're transitioning them into what it's going to look like when they get into the real middle school. So that was the biggest advantage that we heard from those buildings. It eliminated 7th, 8th influence on the younger students. And the grouping of the 5-6 together was better than the 6-7 together, is information that they gave us. The disadvantages was that it adds a transition, and if you read the research says that transitions are difficult for students, and so that's a con. And that only having the students for 2 years is very difficult. The longer you have them, the better relationships you can build, the more you get to know them, and the more successful you can be with those students. So those were disadvantages to having the 5-6 building. Okay, we then pulled together in this district the 5th grade teachers and the 6th grade teachers. We did it on separate events, and so we wanted to hear from the 5th and 6th grade teachers and presented the concept to them and talk about what are your concerns, what do you see as advantages and disadvantages from our own staff. And our 5th grade teachers, overall, they had a lot to say, but primarily they said they liked that it would provide better grouping of students per classroom if we were to go to a 5-6, that it would reduce crowding at their elementary and middle schools, that it would create that softer transition that we talked about. They liked that concept, and that it would benefit to the adding of the playground and recess. That also came up from the 6th grade teachers. One of the things we heard from around the state, when we asked them, what would you do different in your building if you could do something different, the majority of them said we would change our outside spaces. The majority of them had things like ball fields and basketball and foursquare. And what a lot of them said, surprisingly, remember these are 5th and 6th grade buildings, said if we could do it differently, we would have more elementary type structures outside, because we believe 5th and 6th graders still believe in recess, elementary style recess. So we'd have the advantage of doing that. The 6th grade teachers said that the transition model moves students from one teacher to multiple teachers, and so that helps with the transition. There are more opportunities for the counseling services. There'll be additional space for small group services, which we have a big need for today. Additional space for behavior supports, which we have a large need for. Fewer students in the middle school, so there'd be fewer lunch shifts because we don't have as many students. And again, for them, they believe that 6th grade students would benefit from a playground recess concept. So that's what we heard from our staff.
And just so you know about the fewer lunch shifts, we begin lunch at many of our schools at 10:50 in the morning, and we end lunch at 1:15. So think about where you might fit on that in your own life if you were having breakfast or if you were having lunch at 10:50, and then you weren't getting out of work until 4 in some of our cases or later. So just think about that, and that's one of the reasons I think that's a big issue.
I want to touch on the better grouping of students per classroom. That may seem foreign, but if you think about us having 11 elementary schools, we have neighborhood schools. So 1 year in 5th grade, we may have 25 students in 5th grade in a building. So we would probably put 2 teachers in there, so you would have 25 students per class in that year. The next year, there may be 38 students, just the way 650 students disperse over 11 buildings. Some years we have 52, some years there's 38. So 1 year you may have 18 kids a class, and the next year you may have 25. Well, now if you spread those 650 students over just 2 buildings, 650 divided by, say, 21 students, it would be 31 teachers. So you would have between 31 and 32 teachers, and you would maintain 20 to 21 students every year. So just wanted to explain that a little bit.
So when I talk to the students, and again, it was a grand time, and if you've never sat down and talked to a group of 20 or 25 6th graders, I strongly encourage it, because it's a great time. They told me that one of the most important things that the district did to help them was provide tours for 5th grade students. And they felt like those tours were great. They want those tours to be a little bit more inclusive, and we've shared that information with our 6th grade buildings so that we can attempt to beef those up. But that's something that they feel we're doing well. They gave kudos, to many of them, gave kudos to their elementary counselors for helping them with lockers. Does anybody else remember their own locker anxiety? Ryan was saying today that she still has nightmares, that she can't remember a combination. Still to this day. And so, that's something really important. And I think sometimes as adults, we don't always remember all of those things that are really, really important to our little ones. They would like additional opportunities to tour the buildings. They want to be in our buildings more so they can get a sense, because they said the tours took them to certain parts of the area, but they didn't get to see that whole giant building, and they'd like to spend some more time there. And they also wanted more information on the differences between elementary and middle. And they had some great stories to me about the fact that they didn't even understand. One of the most amazing stories to me was that they didn't understand that because the office door is shut, that they were actually allowed to go in and ask a question. They didn't know that you could go in the counseling office and speak to someone because, again, there's a door that is shut. Okay? So that was kind of frightening. So after my little focus groups, we did a tour. And then we got to talk to the counselors, and we did all sorts of things around the building, so we got those students on the right track. But those are just things that, because of our space issues, we learn from the students what we need to do a little bit better. So what did our parents tell us? Our parents said communication. Boy, they need to know what parents should, or what the students should expect, and what those educational expectations are for their kiddos, because they too were feeling like they didn't have enough information. We can obviously work on that. They wanted to have more availability of staff members to answer their questions. And they wanted us to increase the number of opportunities to be in our new school so that it wasn't so crowded and they didn't feel like they couldn't ask their questions of our staff. And so we can work on that. They wanted us to maybe spread out events over multiple nights. And then they wanted to make sure that the reliability of the handouts and information provided was there so that everything we told them was accurate, complete, and something that their family could count on. Now it's Jason.
So we're going to look at a little bit about what a building, a 5-6 building may look like. And before you see it, you need to understand that we've not spent millions of dollars working and having an architectural drawing and having it all done. We're just working on proof of scope. What will something like this cost? So to figure out what something might cost, you need to figure out how big of a building it would be. So working with Architects Alliance, they've been super helpful, and we've worked on an idea of basically a rectangle, because rectangles are less expensive to build than other size shapes. But we would have a 2-floor building of classrooms, and then another section of big spaces. Each building would have a capacity of 800 students. We currently have about 720, well, we do have 720 in the current 5th grade. It's one of our bigger classes. So we have room to grow, and each building we're looking at would be about 140,000 square feet. So here's our beautiful drawing. So you can see the bigger picture would be the main level of the building, and the top part that you see would be the 20 classrooms. What you see on the bottom side over here would be the second story, so there's another 20 classrooms on the second floor. And then on the bottom part of the bigger picture, you can see the media center, kitchen, common, stage, gym, bleachers, all of the big spaces. And then in each of the classroom wings, we have, in the middle parts, we have special education, art, other types of, there's life skills. So this is not what the building will look like. We just are saying that we can fit all of these spaces within our 140,000 square foot building. Should this pass in April, we will then start meeting with staff and really design what an effective space would look like. So just showing that what we need will fit within the 140,000 square foot floor plan. So then we took that, and this is a prior iteration. They started with a bubble gram and came into, but that represents the size of what a 140,000 square foot building would look like. And this is the site that we purchased near Lewis and Clark. And so this would be the location that we would recommend. So you
Given
can
the
see.
bearings of McCarty and Casey's.
Yep,
Your
Stacy's up
Casey's,
here.
here's McCarty. Eastland Drive's there,
Drive's
there's
up
a
there.
track.
Lewis and Clark is up here. And so that's land that we already own, and you can see that we would build a drive from there, and the building would fit nicely on that piece of property. Then on the other side of town, this location, again, we've not done civil engineering, this is just showing that it fits on the land that we own. But this is Lawson Elementary, Special Learning Center down below. Thomas Jefferson will be even farther. So we own all the land behind Special Learning Center, Lawson, Thomas Jefferson. And so putting the building in this area, talking about removing pressure off of Fairgrounds Road, we could build a road behind all of this, so a road from Edgewood that could lead to Thomas Jefferson out Fairgrounds or loop back around. We believe that would relieve a tremendous amount of pressure off of Fairgrounds Road. But again, this is not a lot of money has been spent, just trying to make sure that what we're saying we can do, we will be able to do. So if we do have the land, and we do believe we can make it fit.
And bottom line, we didn't want to spend thousands of dollars assuming voters would say yes, being a good steward of patrons' money. So that's why, how much do you have without assuming folks would say yes as we work through this.
Has that one been cleared with the fire station that's on the corner there?
We've had informal conversations with them that we would need an easement to use the back part of their land, yes.
Okay, I'm actually talking about just the traffic that, you know, when there is a fire, that kind of thing there.
We've had communications with them, and we don't see that being a stumbling block, but yeah, obviously we'll need to continue that.
But you do see what I was mentioning, that the fire station is right there at the corner, and they have a triangle shaped lot, and so we would need to get an easement from the very back end of their property that they don't really have a use for.
Does that include any outdoor space that you were talking about, recess or playground space?
We will definitely include it. Both our teachers and the other districts that we talked to all recommended that we would have outdoor recess space, so we would include that.
But it's not drawn in.
It's not drawn in, right?
But there,
And we're not promising the building wouldn't shift 10 feet the other direction to do that, but.
Okay, so how can we do this without raising taxes? I've heard that question quite a few times. And so, we have two different pots of money. We have our operating funds and we have our debt service funds. And there's a tax levy in each of those and the funds are spent separately. So operations would be paying for teachers and utilities and custodians and everything it takes to operate a building once the building is done. The debt service is borrowing money and the money that's used, that's levied there can only be used to repay principal and interest on that debt. So we're gonna talk first about operations. We said it would have a tax increase if you had a 12th or a 13th elementary school. So if you think about building one new elementary school, that would mean you would be shifting a few kids from each grade from every elementary school and moving them. So if you move just a few kids from each grade, and we have 3 sections in almost every building, that you're not going to reduce any teachers as you move these students across. So you have to have all new teachers. You're basically 100% redoing a staff in a 12th and a 13th building. Where in the 5th and 6th grade option, we already have 5th grade teachers. We're going to move all those 5th graders and those 5th grade teachers into the 5, 6 buildings. We already have 6th grade teachers, same thing, all those students and teachers move in. So that is the huge, overwhelming majority of the operating costs of a building. But there will be some additional costs. We know there will be some additional administrative costs, some additional custodial costs. There will be some additional costs, but we have additional costs every year. And so we will just have to work and find a way, and we will know that we can absorb those additional costs within our current budget. We have a $100 million budget. So we have to be able to absorb additional costs every year. And we were very confident that we can do that in the 5, 6 buildings. So then the debt service part. So this isn't an exact analogy, but if you think about a mortgage on your house. So in 2017, we took out a mortgage, a 20-year mortgage on Capital City High School and Jefferson City High School. So we're 3 years down the road. So if you did a 30-year mortgage on your house and you waited 3 years, interest rates are still at a very low level. We've paid off principal, and actually our assessed valuation has grown, so we're earning more revenue. So by extending the debt, so we would be entering into a new 20-year mortgage at this time, putting off those principal payments out in those out years. And so if you refinanced your mortgage, you've paid down principal, you reissue that debt for that same amount, you've paid down that principal, then you get that money from the bank. So we're going to take that money, and so like with your house, if you had 2 or 3 people sleeping in a bedroom, you could add on additional bedrooms with that money. And that's exactly what we're doing with this. It's what school districts do all over the state. We actually did it in 2007, if anyone remembers the bond issue for Pioneer Trail and the libraries and expansion to all the elementary schools. It was a bond issue without a tax rate increase. It was the exact same thing that was done in 2007. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about that if someone doesn't understand.
Okay.
So the summary of this, we believe the 2, 5, 6 buildings will increase student success. Number one, now is the down the road at a later date, as part of a greater facility plan. Jason touched on the needs that we have is not just, okay, here, there's the end of the line. We have, of our elementary schools, we have, we're here in this building, was built in 1938. Okay, they do a great job in this building. 1938, 1939 here at West Elementary. East Elementary, we're there tomorrow night. It was built the same year. Here's West Elementary. We have needs to continue to maintain our facilities. I grew up on a farm. We have 1,200 acres in Northwest Missouri, and we had to build a fence, a quarter-mile fence, every summer. Why? If you don't build a quarter-mile fence every year, next thing you know, your fences are in poor shape. So if you grew up on a farm, you can kind of understand that. As we look at continuing to, we have needs. We have phase 2 athletic facility needs across the district. We have other needs within our buildings that we need to look at. So as we look at that, now the down the road, as we touched on, it's been 3 years since we shared we would look at that. It alleviates the overcrowding for grades K through 8, removing the trailers, improving staff-student relationships with having just fewer students in a building. When we look at our poverty rates of being at 60% and having 1,000 or 1,100 students in both of our middle schools, and those can be at 600, 700 students, we have a better opportunity to connect and build relationships with our students and their families. Number 3, it provides the opportunity for preschools in our elementary schools. So it provides that opportunities if we move 5th grade out of our elementary schools to free up the opportunity of having a preschool classroom in each of our elementary schools as a possibility. So that's an opportunity that we have, and as we recognize the need of our at the preschool level. Number 4 is just targeting student success in grades 5 through 6 and 7, 8. The softer transitions that Brenda touched on earlier is an important component that we recognize. Overall, nationwide, there is a decline in academic achievement in grades 5 through 8. When you look at the percent of kids reading at or above grade level, it's higher in 3rd grade than 8th grade, let's say. We have the same need here. We as a school district see an opportunity at the 5, 6, 7, 8 opportunity that disparity between the nationwide average and where we are. So there's an opportunity there that we recognize. It provides an alternative transition classroom for student behaviors. When there are choices, at the end of the day, we want our kids to be successful, but we also need to hold them accountable as we work together with our parents for our students to be successful. And then the last one there we touched on, provide the adequate spaces for support services, those we touched on earlier. So doing all of this without raising the tax rate is an important component of our stewardship piece of not raising our tax rate. So the next step is asking our Board of Education to approve the bond language at our board meeting next Monday night. We have this meeting tonight. We have a meeting tomorrow night at East Elementary. It will be the same format. We're going to be asking the language to include the construction of a 5-6 building behind Lewis and Clark and a 5-6 building behind Lawson near TJ, as Jason pointed out earlier. The details would include being a part of the April 2020 election. It would be a no tax rate increase bond issue. Between January and April, stronger together, stakeholder input, town hall venues, touched on when we did the 2017 J+C. We had 107 town hall or community opportunities for feedback. And yes, we did document each of those because I figured somebody would say, you didn't really do that. No, I've got them each itemized, date, times when we met with families. So we'll do the same thing to educate folks on what this would look like going forward. So here's what we want to do. So we are wanting to, we have tablets, and we're not going to say there needs to be 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 or 8, whatever you're comfortable with, and if you're comfortable with doing that, we would like your input on, have we missed any pros and cons? And we would like, we're going to put a timer here, and we would like in your neighborhoods here in this West Elementary Gymnasium, if you would collectively, if you would have a spokesperson, if you'd have someone, as far as timer, we'll have a timer up here. Do we have that timer, Brenda? We will have a timer for you, just to kind of keep us on track. And we're going to ask you, then a spokesperson, just to report out to the group. We'll pass the microphone around. Did we miss any pros and cons? And we're not asking to reiterate the ones we've identified, and maybe you do, and that's no big deal. Did we miss any? And then the second part of that is we're just going to, are there additional questions that you might have? So we just want this to be very transparent as we work through that and go through it in our groups if you're willing to do that. Yes?
Okay. I'm taking a look at this, and I'm concerned about the students with their academic achievement. We already know our school district is near rock bottom when it comes to academic achievement compared to a lot of the schools. There is a website, and it's www.ernweb.com, educational research, that identifies that every time that students are moved from school to school, they lose, in most cases, a year of academic study. And I don't know if you all have looked at it, but basically it says research shows, and has for 20 years, that the more time students change schools, the more achievement is at risk. This is not only true for kids who move during the school year, but also for kids who change buildings as part of the district policy. Typically, there is a 1-year decline in achievement for each transition. Though the decline is recovered, it can also be avoided. Kids who attend this district with fewer transitions have fewer decline achievements. Kids who attend the districts with more transitions have more declines in achievement. JC School District appears to propose requiring 3 transitions of every student. K through 4 to 5th through 6th, 5th through 6th to middle school, and middle school to high school. The same research in Missouri on Missouri schools shows that most disruptive building changes in when school districts funnel kids through multiple buildings into just 1 or 2 new schools, as Jeff City School District proposes. The proposal is not in keeping with what educational research on Missouri schools shows is helpful to student learning. And this can be found at https://www.ernweb.com. Educational research articles, achievement decline when students change schools. Now, my concern is when we already are dealing with near rock bottom achievement, when we make these transitions, talking about overcrowding, there are things that we need to do about overcrowding. But we're steadily doing things that are putting our achievement at risk of our students. And why would we make changes that are gonna cause our children to be more at risk when it comes to achievement, when that's what the purpose of a school is, to teach, and to teach in the best way they can, and to bring up the academic achievement. Because guess what? Our students are at school more than they're at home. Guess they have to sleep. And we have to trust the school district to perform and help teach, and the teachers need those tools as well. And so if our district is making decisions that are going contrary to what the studies are saying, then I'm concerned about how it's hurting them. And we just had a lot of the e-school students moved and being bussed out, especially the lower income students, which already have a lot of challenges to overcome. And they're being bussed and moved and, you know, their parents and different people are doing the best they can. And so I'm concerned about that. As a community person, as people that, and as a person that has family members in the school district.
Okay, fair question, I appreciate you sharing that. Could I go ahead and answer them, Jackie, please? Could I answer that?
Oh, yes, I thought you had. You're talking about the timer. I thought you had answered that.
No, I'm just getting ready to. We recognize the transition years, that was some of the negative. When we talked to the schools, 16 of the 22 schools, I believe all of those schools had shared that their academic achievement of their 5th and 6th graders went up compared to how it was before. Now, that's not to say that your research or wherever that is, that's not valid. I'm not implying that. We've asked our schools, we recognize the transition. When they build relationships, that is one of the negative elements of that. But when we talk to our schools, that the schools that have this, that was the primary, as in the only negative of that. So we recognize that, but they, on being intentional and purposeful with the 5th and 6th graders and those needs that are different, a 6th grader need is different than an 8th grader, of what that looks like, they saw the achievement scores go up. So I appreciate the part of busing. We did change some boundary lines and moved East Elementary back to how it was before. So we're not busing them out. I'm not sure what you're referencing. We do provide transportation for each of our elementary schools. And so to indicate that they were bused out somewhere, I'm not sure what you're referencing.
Well, a lot of those students struggle. When they had to make that transition, just as this study says, those students struggle.
Okay.
And that's basically what I'm saying, along with the study. When they keep switching buildings and have to make those transitions, a lot of them are struggling.
Right, Moral Heights and Thorpe and East.
Still broken up from what they were used to.
What they were used to. We do recognize changing of a boundary lines, that we had community town hall meetings when we worked through that. So We,
We're gonna break up into smaller groups.
Jackie, hold on a
You know, one of
second.
the other options too that were presented was adding in 2 elementary schools. Doing so would also cause transition to those 2 elementary schools. I mean, I agree, I think that transition is scary to me as well as a parent, but I feel like the other options that are presented up there too, if you did research on each one of those options, I'm sure you're gonna find cons on all of those, and research probably gets into all of those in some aspects. So you have to kind of come up with, based on all the research, what makes the best for our community, our school district, and all those things.
Yeah, but elementary schools are basically the same level, you know, and that's more of the norm. You're talking about K through 5th grade. You're not talking about a separate 5th grade, going K through,
No,
K
we're
through 4,
researching-
then a 5th grade, then going to a middle school, you know.
The research
That's
is there.
what this research is for.
I didn't hear you specify specific grades, though.
Yeah,
If-
that's what this research.
Okay.
I thought it was elementary.
Yeah.
If we could, we'll address the questions here. We would like, because I know there were some folks that said that their time is important to you. We would like, and we'll put a timer here of 5 minutes. If you would in a group of pros and cons, and then if you'll have a spokesperson per group, and then we will convey those out. We'll pass the microphone around. And then the second part is if there's additional questions you feel like we haven't addressed. So, if you would.
My problem, Gordon, this is the same format that we've used in the past. We start from hour, then we go into small groups, and not all the information. When we did our middle schools, we were well aware, well in advance of a board meeting to go with the tax levy, with the bond issue, and the language. And that's when I was on the school board, and we did 6, 7, 8. This is like in the dark. Now you bring us here, then we get into small groups and talk about the pros and the cons. I don't have the information. You've not presented to me the names of those only 20 school districts. How large are they? How long, if they've had this configuration for 10 years, you've not provided the data. As far as I'm concerned, we can go in the groups, talk about pros and cons based on what you gave us. I really feel like there is time for a need to do something with our educational system. But to give us this opportunity before Monday, to me, is not what we did when we did the middle school. We had years of thinking about it, talking about it, working on it, but now you bring us here, take an hour of a 2-hour presentation, then I'm gonna meet with someone in a small group that may or may not know any more than me, and we talk about giving you pros and cons. You suck up the time, and you don't give the community an opportunity to understand. No tax increase is not a big deal for me, because I'm concerned about a K through 12 delivery system, and to me, you're addressing something in the middle with another transition, and you've not engaged this community in knowing how to do that. You can suck up and buy land because of a tornado, $2 million or whatever amount. You can take the kids out of each school and change them around. Now they're going back. You've not shown your due diligence on K through 12 academic achievement. You said, let's put an intervention at 5 and 6. The massive 500 school districts don't have that. We have aging elementary schools. When you do all of that, they're aging. The boiler, all of that to me is, when we go into this group and you put the timer on it, I'm gonna go into a group, and then we're gonna all be sitting there looking at each other. Half the people in here are educators or on the group that you had. We did 18 months on a long-range planning committee after they wanted to have a mega school, and we voted that down because it wasn't a good scenario for this school district. So now you're asking us to go to 5, 6, and only 22 districts have it, or 20, and most of them had it for 10 years. That's because they have low enrollment, probably more rural than we are. Probably don't have the same population, and you want us to buy that data, and you never presented up there the name of those school districts, what their achievement is, what their tax rate is. You didn't give us any of that. So all I'm going to say, Dr. Linton, I respect you and all the administrators here. But when we did the middle schools, and I sat through those meetings, it wasn't a week before you go until the boards pass this and put a ballot, something on the ballot. You know, it almost makes me do what I have to do with the mega school. Go in my pocket and get some school signs and have a small committee to kill that situation. If
Was
we-
the task force that you guys did, was that a public process? How was that? How were people allowed to take part?
We had a focus group started a year ago, and I think, are there,
It wasn't a public
So-
process. It wasn't public.
right, the
We
focus,
invited social public meetings where people can come and hear, understand the issue. There were not public meetings.
they were focus group meetings, which the directive, I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Handpicked by the administration.
Trying to be reflective of our stakeholders, of consider options K through 8. So, I know there are some, and some maybe doesn't all, we're not always going to agree, but we would like to. I know there were some interested, we've had some conversations before, looking at the pros and cons. So, if you would, in your groups, if you're willing, and as small or as large as you would like, if there would be a spokesperson to report out with your group, if you would identify that, introduce yourself, please. Again, thank you guys for being here, and we'll start here 5 minutes, and then we'll report out. Here are the questions, reminders. We missed any pros and cons. What other questions do you have?
So about 9 months ago, we started a focus group process where we actually parents, community members, business owners, and small business owners, as well as retired teachers. And in order to get a better understanding of what they thought they should do, that they asked me to do is to change all of our staff to better understand what else they do. And that's frontline staff, all the way from teachers to improve any of our they also reviewed studies that are So as a mother, that 6th grade transition is a really hard one. You know, from the community-based elementary school to our school where they're feeding in 6 or 7 different elementary schools. You are going to a team concept, which is great, but there's 100 kids up here, 2 kids as opposed to 12 classrooms. That's just a very difficult transition. As well as for students. So for me personally, I think that's something.
Okay, our timer works, we found out. Give us a thumbs up from your table if you're good, and if you're not, no thumbs up. Thumbs down, okay. Are you guys good there? How about over here? Thumbs up, down? Down, okay, they're good over there. You're fine, okay. We need to wait here. Thumbs down, okay. Okay, are you guys ready? Okay, I think we'll get started. We went over a little 5 minutes that we did, so if you guys could summarize. I think we'll go through, Brenda, could you bring the questions back? I would ask, out of respect for everyone that is here and out of respect for everyone's time, if you would try to limit the time from your group, each spokesperson, pros and cons, and if you have additional questions, we will document, we'll write those questions. If we don't answer now, we'll provide a written response. Okay, yes, and as a reminder, would you please sign up? We want to provide feedback to you with your questions, and we'll respond in writing to you with your questions. So as Brenda is holding up, if you would please sign that, we can provide you answers to your questions specifically. So if you would do that, we would appreciate that, please. There's one on every table. Okay, first group here. Can we get started? Okay, we'll just kind of work our way around the horn.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Milholland. I am the principal at Bel Air Elementary School. I also have a second grade and a kindergarten daughter, so if you're a second grade parent, you know that this would be affecting you first. That would be the first group of fifth graders to go to that fifth, sixth grade building, so I could wear both hats tonight. So we talked about pros and cons at our table. We felt like a pro that wasn't missed, but maybe not emphasized enough, was that fifth and sixth graders would be getting recess and that outside time and how important that is to their development. The cons that we discussed, one of the main ones is that that in the elementary schools, there would alleviate 3 to 4 rooms, and is that enough for our future? So I don't believe we had any other questions at this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have to do something as both parent and principal. We have to do something. It is needed. It is necessary. And talking about it for years is not a good solution.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Bryn Thorsten. I am a Bel Air elementary parent as well as a Thomas Jefferson parent. A couple of pros that were listed. We do understand that this would be another transition for our students, but at the same time, we do believe that it's a little less jarring of a transition than some of the transitions they've seen in the past. The fifth graders that would be moving into this building would be together for the next 5 years through 12th grade, or do the math, whatever it takes. I swear, I do not handle money, I promise, as a bank. Anyhow, nonetheless, yes, they're moving to another facility, but this would be a team that would move throughout the rest of their transitions or throughout the rest of their buildings together. So we do kind of feel like the transitions that they would incur after the fact would be a lot softer, less jarring. As far as cons go, a little concern about vertical alignment of communication between buildings. A ninth grade building was talked about, how there was just a little misalignment with the communications between getting the high school and the ninth grade building on the same page. Kind of concerned that it would do the same thing here with 2 buildings at the middle school, that it's just a matter of making certain the communications between all the buildings are the same. Questions that we had, I believe Ms. Milholland just answered one of them, so our clarification. So our current second grade class would be the first fifth grade class, so 3 years?
Yeah, I did that. That was in my math. Yeah. We were curious when okay, so it would be in 3 years. Okay. We would like to know more information about the 22 school districts that are currently or do currently have the 5-6 buildings. I think somebody mentioned there was a Springfield one, but which would be kind of interesting just to see. And then we're curious how this affects busing. There was a comment or two that was made that just we weren't 100% certain which start times and how the busing would go with that. So those were our questions.
Yeah, we love it.
So the busing question. So So the way we currently run our buses, we have 2 tiers. We have all of our elementary schools in the first tier, and then after the buses, let's just do the morning routes. The buses run an elementary route, they deliver students to elementary schools, then they run a secondary route. And just as of January, in the second tier route, we have buses that run only middle school routes and only high school. So we have the same buses doing 2 routes. So we would do the same thing. K4 would run in the morning, and so that's 5 grades. That group of buses would then run the 9-12 routes. Then we would have 5-6 would be on the same time as elementaries. They would run in the morning, or the early route, the first route, and then they would run the 7-8 as the second route. So 7-8 and 9-12 would be the second tier.
To the next group. You can take that to the next group.
Amy Schwartz, and I currently have 2 elementary students at Cedar Hill and have a graduate of JC High School. So, and I'm speaking for my committee here. We have some things that are kind of more questions. Maybe they fall into pros and cons. We do agree that this transition seems better than others, and I just wanted to point out that up until this year, we had the same number of transitions because we had a 9th grade building. So this is the first year we've had less transitions than we've ever had, so it would be the same number as we had then. We do have a question about the recess. Currently, even in our elementary buildings, recess gets cut a lot for anything that, things that need to happen or things that go on. So keeping that sacred recess kind of thing is something that we kind of have a concern about. We are concerned about removing 2 or 3 classrooms and then adding pre-K to those rooms. How much space are you actually really gaining? So that's a question. Let's see. We're also a little bit concerned when we talked about, looked like there was really only space for about 80 more students in each of the buildings. How long does that really gonna last? And are we gonna be down here in another 7 to 10 years looking at we're out of space again? So that was one of our questions. And then we haven't talked about teacher to student ratios, and those vary greatly across the district right now in our elementary buildings. And so that's just something we'd really like to talk about. Like classroom size here at West, we're talking 16 to 18 students. At Bel Air, we're talking 25 in the same grades. So that's a concern that we have. And how does it help those kind of things? Because that's still going to be an issue. Is that? Oh, and then we've listed redistricting or reboundering as a con, and our group doesn't really necessarily think that's a con. We actually think that drawing boundaries that make more sense for some of our outlying areas and actually doing it throughout the district is not necessarily a con, and that we should really look into that.
Sure, can I just speak to we just last year, after going through the boundary issue with the high schools, we did put as part of policy, so now in a formal policy in our, that was adopted by the board last year, we have a mandated time frame so that even if we don't build another building, if we don't do anything facilities-wise, there's a policy that now dictates for the board to revisit boundary lines and look at boundary for the district-wide on a regular basis. So that's
what's the regular basis?
Well, so it's 3 years, right? It's every 3 years. So we did it. It was looked at district-wide when we drew lines for high schools, and then we adopted the policy last year. I'd have to go back and look at the exact date. but the policy committee brought that proposal to the board, and the board could approve that we will go no more than 3 years without looking at boundaries and district-wide for all grades. So that's now formally in policy.
Thank you.
Apparently it's my turn. Hi guys, how are you doing? My name is John Nelson. I'm a parent of 3 children at Moral Heights. One will be in middle school next year. Pray for me. So we have pros and cons here. We have multiple pages, so just strap in. Here we go. Pros, pre-K class option, which is awesome. Yay. Allow the 5th grade to have different learning styles and subject focus. That's really good. Cons, not taking care of building needs. We'll address that a little bit in a little bit, but just that there needs to be upgrades in a lot of these buildings. Larry, you mentioned some of the building dates of these buildings, including Moral Heights and where we were. And just a lot of those pictures look familiar to me being a watchdog in that building. Not enough information, as we talked about a little bit earlier. Seems like the process is moving pretty quickly, and once the board decides on it, seems to be a done deal, and now we're spending money to vote on it. So is there a way to slow the process down, to get more information from the public before we're forced to vote on it? And then new space is already filled. If we're only moving, using Moral Heights as an example, apologize, I got small groups tomorrow night. We move 3 5th grade classrooms out, and we add, for our district, which would be one of those that's almost completely full, with 2 pre-K classes and putting Mr. Musselman back in the music class, we're back in capacity. So that goes back to the upgrading of the building space. We really need more space. Which then comes to the questions. What are the other districts? How do they compare to JCPS? Size, population, tax rates, achievability, and poverty rates. What are those? How do we get that information? Will there be more information for the April vote? Common theme. What is the timeline for schools being at capacity without this change? We saw some of that, but what are the rest of them? What will sports look like? Because, you know, we're Jefferson City. Next page. What plan is in progress to protect the taxpayers' investment in both schools, including maintenance issues? Because we may have covered this 100%, but with the maintenance issues, again, I'll just use my school's example of Moral Heights being back at 100% almost immediately. How do we expand it? How do we not find ourselves back in this situation? Why wasn't there a better management plan in effect at the old high school before this all came about with the long-term planning?
I'm going to stop you.
Yes, sir.
It's the new Jefferson City High School.
Okay, the new Jefferson High School.
I won't let you call it the old high school.
You know, so I call it OG, just personally. That's me, you know.
I'm not going to let you do that.
All right. Let's go to the left. All right. We talked about busing, so that's already in there. Parking at the new buildings, help us out. And then why not use Simon's? And I'll end there. We have more, but I'll end there because I think we've covered the rest of them there. So yeah, there you go. We'll submit those.
My name is John Burton, and I have 3 children who came through our school system, and my wife is currently an educator here in Jefferson City. Our questions are much quicker. I don't know where you got all that time to come up with those, but we thought that several of the pros of this particular setup would be the way it affects the special services. And the first part of that would be that if you're building those schools geographically close to each other, the 5th and 6th, and then the 7th and 8th, that those special services that are given at both of those places, there's probably some synergy there. And then also at the same time, when you are eliminating those students from the elementary schools, those individuals who are providing special services at the elementary level, that ratio then is a better number for them. And so looking at just those types of things. I had a question. When you were giving the example about the funding, I understand the analogy about the mortgage. What I'm really kind of interested in is what is our estimate for that number, though? Is it, if instead of speaking about 3 years or 4 years, what is it actually going to cost to build these 2 schools? Just a rough estimate. That's it. Anything else from our group?
Okay,
Lots of the ones that we have down on our paper, because they're mostly questions, have already been asked, so I'll just go over the ones that have not been addressed. There was a concern at our table about the no tax increase and not trusting that that's really true from a leadership perspective. That if this does not pass, would there actually be a decrease in taxes, or is it going to hold? So that's a question that some people thought that they might like to be answered. More information about how this plan actually is going to expand pre-K needs, and if there's ever been a consideration for a larger building for just pre-K. That's already been addressed. What is the cost of the 5-6 buildings versus the 2 elementary building model? More information on that. And has there ever been a student density map study done to see if we have the students that are going to fill these buildings, or if the buildings are not going to serve their purpose and be overcrowded already? So those are some of the concerns that have not. Oh, the one last concern was kind of similar to what the gentleman just brought up, is with the spaces cleared up in these schools, what is the district's plan on how to what resources you have to pay for the needs that you plan to use the space for. So what do you plan to do to pay for resources needed to utilize the space that's cleared up effectively?
Okay, we will, they were documenting your questions here. If you signed up, we will provide a written response. I do just a couple of highlight things. The list of 22 schools, we'll provide that to you. Absolutely. This is no secret. I made a loop. I took a Friday and drove to Southwest Missouri. Nixa has 2 5-6 buildings. Springfield, Reed Spring, Willard. Willard had a 6-8 building that was overcrowded, and they built a 5-6 building here in the last 2-3 years. And so then they made their 6-8 building into a 5-6 building. So Willard has 2 5-6 buildings. If you know Matt Teeter, who was assistant principal at Thomas Jefferson, he's the superintendent at Willard, and gave me a tour, gave me the data and so forth. So it's not hidden information. We didn't provide that. The information we shared of the different parts to it, the preschool, as far as with 2 preschool, it provides opportunities. We don't anticipate having 2 preschool classes at Moral Heights. That's not been determined. With 2 elementary schools possibly share 1 preschool classroom, what would that look like? That's not been determined. That we're going to have 2 preschool classrooms, John, as you touched on, which was a good question. The cost, I believe, that Architects Alliance has given us of an estimate of $65 million for both of the 5-6 buildings. Okay, so that's estimates that Jason and Carrie, who's here, thank you for being here with Architects Alliance, and Nat Holtz, Mitch, they've been helping us get an estimate on what that would cost as well. Any other highlight of
I'll talk briefly. Laura, you mentioned what happens if this fails, will the tax rate go down? And yeah, it would. So we've issued debt, and once those bonds are 100% paid off, that debt service rate would go down. And so I need to look, it's 17 or 18 years from now that would go. And so when we put the high school project on the ballot, the idea that it was actually John Ruth was president of the school board at that time, and the way he envisioned it, we designed the debt structure so that we could do this. And so he liked to think about it like the city and county road tax. So every 5 years, we know that they're going to come with to extend that 5-year tax, and there's going to be a new list of projects that are going to come about. And so we have more projects. John mentioned, we have almost 2 million square feet of building under roof in the district. And so we need to be able to maintain that. And we can't maintain that with our current budget. But 3 or 4 years from now, we may be coming back with a bond issue. I mean, the middle schools are 26 years old now. We're going to need to be doing some things at the middle schools. We have Moral Heights, Thorpe Gordon. I probably shouldn't have started the list, but I know we have five elementary schools that we haven't renovated. Like this school, we've done a complete remodel. But I know we haven't at Moral Heights and Thorpe Gordon. Those are the next two on the list.
Jason, you mentioned that in 3 to 4 years we'd be coming back with a bond issue. I just want to clarify that that is a no tax rate increase bond issue, not coming back.
Exactly, just like the city county road tax, they come to us every 5 years with a new list of projects or what they're gonna do if you pass that. And if that were to fail, that rate would go away, and that's the same way, ours isn't 5 years, it's 17 or 18 years down the road. But we have a lot of needs throughout the district, and so we're just trying to check those off as we go along. We can't do everything all at once.
What is that long range plan? The three schools are in as an option, but just like Columbia, they gave you a 5-year long-range plan, not based on the ability for the school district just to keep, when you run out of bonds and go back. You don't really have to get the community input as much when you're doing it that way. You say no tax increase, people like it. But the reality is, show me your 5-year facility plan that includes pre-K in all the buildings. Not say the opportunity. That's what we did with the elementary schools. Our board put in, we would never look at kindergarten until our enrollment at the 3rd grade reached a certain point. That was kicking the can down the road. We're the last school district to have full day kindergarten. So we got it. We built on. But why we need to see a vision of what the plan is for this school district, and not just to say, you can have your will to do what you want to, because we don't have to pay taxes. I would rather pay taxes. I would rather you redistrict and not have the opportunity just to say, we can extend the bond, and because when everybody's gone, we will have 5 paid. We better make sure that's the delivery system that we want. I would rather see like Columbia does. Give me a 5-year plan. I agree with the redistricting. Most superintendents don't want to redistrict because that's going to be a death wish. But in this community, you've got to redistrict. You've got to bite the bullet. And we've got to get updated elementary schools. These schools, you can keep putting a lipstick on a pig. And that's what that amounts to in the whole building.
What was Columbia's tax rate?
I'm not talking about the tax
16.
rate. I'm talking about quality education.
Exactly.
I'm talking about achievement scores. I'm talking about not having people leave this community and go down the road to another school district. We might have a decrease in our population until you present a plan, and to me, people will pay the taxes. But when you have our money, you can go out and buy a tornado property at the tune of $2 million and build a baseball field. I'm not against that. But all CEOs and all leadership and all businesses will give you a 5-year plan for your facility. I don't see that. I see an intervention here and there because you don't have to come to us for a tax increase. And to me, if you're not achieving where is pre-K? We should have pre-K in this community. And Southwest is not big enough to accommodate the needs of our pre. If we have a low income and have all these poverty kids, we say, then we should have pre-K. Not in one little school or one room in one building. I guess from that scenario I saw, it's going to be special education.
So wait a minute, Jackie, there was no talk of removing Southwest and not having
I
them
didn't
have
say
pre-K.
that. I did not say that.
It was talking about
I did not
expansion
say
of
that.
pre-K.
Pre-K is where they tell the research says that's what's going to make a difference in the achievement and your community.
Why we're trying to expand?
You did not say you were going to give pre-K the opportunity. That needs to be in that plan. We need to know what that's going to be. And we need to give our special education teachers more resources, more aids, but not just say we'll have more rooms for special education when we take out the other kids. That sounds like we just going to. So I'm not saying, all I'm saying, this is a lot to digest tonight. But the reality, where's our 5-year facility plan? I think you need that.
Okay. Jackie, appreciate your comments. Your questions here that Ryan took notes, the ones that we didn't address. There was a lot of different ones, a lot of different elements of that, the pros and cons. Your email that we've asked you to provide, we'll provide a written response to each of those, and we appreciate your input as we look at the pros and cons with this. So I want to thank you guys for coming here this evening as we work strong together, and a lot of good input, good ideas, things for us to consider, and have a great evening and have safe travels home. Thank you.
So if somebody didn't sign up, I've got this sheet.
Brenda, if you did not sign up, Brenda has a sheet right here. If you